let's start by having introductions. So here comes the slide. Let's start here with Josh and then Paul. Josh.
Hey, everybody. Okay, so last panel here, keeping it a little lively. We'll try to wake up all the sleepers in the room. My name's Josh Ahrensberg. I'm lucky. I have one of the best jobs that I could possibly think of in the industry. I own global business development for media and entertainment for Verizon. I get to work across a whole slew of different areas, and I get to work in a space that I spent my entire career, including winning an Emmy for some crazy television nonsense. So I'm not your normal tech person, but I do have a long career doing technology and implementing technology for the industry that I operate in. And for my last two roles, which previously was at Comcast and now at Verizon, I basically have a role that you can think of as a CTO, a domain-specific CTO within an organization. So I'm thrilled to be here today to talk to you guys about my perspective. And I've really, I have to say, I've enjoyed today learning a lot about this space, because some of the stuff that I'll share with you today I think is so relevant to the topics that you guys are thinking a lot about.
Yeah, Paul Schwazel. I'm the Vice President of Transport and Networking at American Tower. I'll be sharing with you guys some of what we are doing around the world and what we think and feel about this, the edge, whether it be metro or in any of its forms.
Good stuff. Thanks, guys. I think the panel here, Cloud Metro and the 5G Network Edge, the reason I kind of wanted to do this one, I thought is a little bit, as Josh was saying, but also many of the topics Tim brought up, it wasn't quite as sophisticated as that. It was more like, if I'm a user, if I'm a customer on my phone, how quick can I get stuff? Or if I'm at my house or wherever it is, it's like, how fast can it be? How can the experience be good? And a lot of that turns out to be not just how good my access connection is, but where the stuff is and how I can get to it and how I can get to it really fast. So that's the topic. First point we have, here's the panelists. First point is I've titled it Metro Edge Geography. Let's go to Tim first on this, but then let's have Josh and Paul come in. And you can come back as well. Anyone in the room is very welcome to contribute. So, Tim, the question is, for the network edge and the associated data center you have there, does the physical location matter more or less than the logical architecture you have deployed? And my second bullet, if I'm here in Manhattan, I'm barely a distance from a number of carrier hotels or data centers, same in London, same in Paris.
Gosh, it's. I guess with a lot of questions, the answer is it depends, right? So it depends very much on the service that you're trying to access, what type of that service that is, what are the demands of that service. One of the things we talk a lot about on the Cloud Metro side is being able to monitor the actual service experience of customers. So we're not just talking about anymore the traditional metro network monitoring of layer 1, layer 2, layer 3 connectivity. We're actually talking about generating, whether it's a voice service or a video service or web or DNS or VPN even, whatever the service, we're generating application-specific synthetic traffic and effectively acting like an end user in the network, generating that traffic, and we have that ability to generate it and monitor all the way through the network, whether it's just the metro network or even into data centers, with those test agents embedded in the product, and really trying to understand, okay, depending on the type of service and whether latency is important, or whether it's just throughput or a combination of things, that response time, if it's a gaming service. So the answer to this, it does depend a little bit on the service. If you need rapid response times and low latency, then of course being closer to where the content is or where to the hosting of that service is generally better. If it's throughput, then depending on, again, where the content is and the connectivity to that maybe cloud-based service, it may not be the shortest path that is the highest throughput. So it depends very much on the service requirements and how you can best deliver those It could be that it's closer. It could be that it's further away. There's not an easier answer. It depends on the service. Make sense?
Yeah. Anyone? Josh, you want to have a go?
Okay, I'll try to comment a whole bunch on this one. Okay, so listen, there's so I'm going to take this from a media and entertainment specific perspective for you guys, because obviously you spend a lot of time thinking about how these networks and how the core operates and how the RAN works. So, when we look at media and entertainment, we look at the contribution side and we look at the distribution side. On the contribution side, there is a huge opportunity here to locate the content very close. What we're seeing, and let's talk about venues. Let's talk about in the venue space, in the stadium, on the golf course. We see the opportunity. We did this great use case earlier in the year with the X Games, right? We put 5G cameras, 4K cameras out in the field of play in the venue. And basically we were able to decable the venue, right? Because a lot of times we talk about this occasional use services where people come into a location, whether it's an inauguration, whether it's a big sporting event, and they've got to run just miles and miles of fiber, of coax, of Ethernet. And so there's a real, I think, turning point with 5G, which is to say, listen, we can create specific capability and services that can answer the contribution needs of the industry. And that means connecting a camera directly to the 5G network. That means working with 5G MAG. I'm on the board of 5G MAG. If you don't know 5G MAG is the 5G Media Action Group. It's the rep organization to 3GPP for the M&E industry. And we're doing good things with 5G MAG because we're thinking about when you hit record on a camera, and historically that would record to a hard drive, right, inside the camera. Now, when you hit the record button, can we talk directly to an API? Can that API become aware of the bandwidth available to then have that camera send back that 4K high quality video, and can that then go directly to, and this is a very important point for this, can it go directly to the cell site, right, to the front hall, as I'm getting to learn the terminology, and then can that go right back to the production truck that's sitting in the same venue, that might even be connected to the same cell site or physically connected directly to the network. So that is just on the contribution side. Now let me comment on the distribution side. We all are very familiar with what's happening on the distribution side because you hear it talked about as OTT, over the top. Right? We talk about these services sitting on top of a network that exists today. But what we're seeing, and today is a perfect example of, well, what does it mean to now integrate that content delivery experience into the hands of the consumers? I'm talking about the Disney Pluses of the world. I'm talking about the app experiences that are happening on smart devices. I'm talking about, I made this prediction earlier in the year to the ATSC. If you're not familiar with the ATSC, they are the Advanced Television Standards Committee in North America, well, at least in the US, that owns broadcasting, terrestrial broadcasting. And I said, listen, I think we're looking at a situation where we're going to see 5G radios inside of televisions, inside of the physical set, right? And when that happens, you've got this opportunity to deliver to that set advertising, all this content experience. And when you're doing that, and I know it's a long-winded answer, but when you're doing that, you are then looking at, well, how can I, with a piece of advertising, deliver on a network that same ad unit, that same piece of data? Can I then deliver it to multiple destinations, to multiple use cases with that same asset, and take advantage of efficiency across my backbone, take efficiency across my radio network? And those things are going to become very important because, as we know, in any given evening, a huge amount of the traffic that we're delivering across the network is people watching live, video, whether live or on demand.
And so once you get that video, I'll come to you in a moment, Paul. Does it, it's about the edge question, really. Mike Kier had a big big straw in it, and like reading in the week saying, do we really need it? If we can get that video, that Disney or that golf game or whatever into New York, we don't really need any more edge than that, right?
Yeah.
I mean,
yeah, okay, listen, so I was in Boston yesterday and I had a conversation literally with, we'll leave the name of one of the largest media companies out there, and I was sitting at this breakfast with this individual who owns delivery for this very large media company, and he said to me, Josh, what does it mean, latency? Like, is it really matter? I mean, we're delivering when the person hits play, when the customer hits play, are they really eight seconds versus 8 milliseconds versus 45 seconds? Okay, so the answer there, it's not exactly simple, and we're still figuring it out. We don't have all the answers. Here's what we know early on. What we know early on is that the ultra low latency is definitely something I talk a lot about at Verizon. It's one of our core tenets of why we're implementing and spending the dollars we are on 5G, and we think that low latency does have real value. There are specific use cases where you want to be able to deliver. I'll use Bloomberg as an example. We put out a great piece on Bloomberg where we basically had Bloomberg remove their satellite workflow and use 5G instead of satellite. Well, that's a pretty big reduction in latency. And if you're a day trader and you want to be able to watch Bloomberg faster than anybody else and know what's happening in the market, well, there's some value for that. But if your grandmother, watching a piece of VOD content, then that may not be as important. I think around the latency conversation is also the timing conversation, is being able to think about delivering content where we can all see it at the same time across multiple platforms. That's a challenge for our industry right now.
Mm-hmm. Let's bring Paul in, and then
I was just going to ask one. I can wait, but I was just going to.
Yeah, let's wait because Paul hasn't had a chance yet. And then we'll have.
No, I mean, from our perspective, from American Tower's perspective, with our acquisition of CoreSite, all of a sudden Metro Edge geography claimed an entirely different level of importance with us. We operate in 25 countries, and we do have edge data centers in several of them. So a lot of what you're asking in this question is something that we deal with on a daily basis. The physical location doesn't make that much of a difference if you're within New York or in LA, where one of our data centers covers. We're within a handful of microseconds of several blocks of prime real estate. But if you're dealing with edge data centers in Mexico or in Argentina or in Africa, now we're dealing with the realities of dealing with physics. Now we have to solve for CDNs, but we also have to solve for other things that are a bit more in our DNA. As our last name being Tower, we're focused on how do we solve for the latency issue when latency is an integral part of 5G. So if we look at the micro aspect, we're working and we work very closely with Verizon as well on how do we solve this latency issue on the delivery of the content and making sure that the end user experience, which is at the end of the day what we're all working for, that the end user experience is what was expected. We're working right now on a project where the edge has been taken into a mall, into Miracle Mile in Vegas, where we've deployed a 5G solution with AWS. And one of the things that we were experiencing is okay, so now we have the core in the cloud. We have the 5G equipment already providing services. How do we solve for that one use case that you were talking about, which is someone who just took a video? How do we get that processed locally? So we're delivering a solution that takes the UPF off the cloud and delivers it locally. And so now the people who are there within the facility are looking at, are dealing with very low millisecond latency levels versus the 100 plus if they were dealing with the cloud.
And I think from what you've both said, and just trying to link it back to what I was saying in the beginning, it depends on the service, right? So we ultimately need the networks to be service aware. If it's video content, being pushed out, that's one set of service requirements. If it's distribution, it's another set of service requirements. If it's video gaming, it's a different set of service requirements. If it's video calls, it's another set. We actually can't afford to build networks everywhere that can do the superset of all of those. We need to be efficient in our network builds, and we need to put things locally where we have to have a certain amount of local content and capability, and where we can afford to centralize certain things and share certain infrastructure, we have to do that. And it's that ability of the network to understand what it's carrying that we need. And so, like I said, that you can, here's a service with these characteristics, therefore I need to send that service to this cloud versus that cloud, right? That's the sort of awareness that we need to build in. But equally, for that end user experience, we've got to be able to monitor each of those individual services. It's no good anymore just to monitor at layer 2, layer 3. No, we need to know this is a video service which requires this latency, this delay, this throughput, right? All of those types of things. And then based on that, the network knows, okay, I need to send this here, not there.
Yeah, that takes you to another issue, which is the level of complexity that you have to tackle at the onset to make sure that you simplify in the end. Yeah. So in the end, if you end up with a network that's slice capable, that's able to slice a user flow that starts on the fixed side and goes all the way to the last radio. Now we're talking about something that can handle exactly those type of use cases.
Exactly, and like you said, it's complex, and that's why we cannot do this with manual operations anymore.
Yeah, thanks. This is to Josh, and more to clarify and some of my own ignorance in how Verizon is structured itself. But the comments that Gabriel referred to and I did this morning, the public comments from Verizon around Edge not living up to initial expectations within Verizon, we're in the Verizon business context. So I'm wondering, from your comments, are you folded into Verizon business and maybe you're kind of seeing something more positive than the overall company? Some of the other enterprise applications aren't happening? Or are you sitting outside of Verizon business where the media entertainment is doing things where, seeing early demand in Edge, whereas Verizon business as a whole isn't? I don't know if that makes sense. Kind of sort of where do you sit within the overall Verizon business where we saw these sort of, measured comments about
Verizon business.
You are, okay.
I think Mike's story, though, was actually referring to the business side's going pretty well, the on-prem edge, and it's the in-network edge that was struggling. Not struggling, but just taking the time. And I think it's because it's already a pretty good service most places.
Yeah, and we're doing a lot. I mean, I haven't mentioned the Streaming Video Alliance stuff that we've deployed on our network, which really, is really cool stuff around open caching. I'm a big believer in open standards, as I'm sure a lot of you in this room are, especially if you're thinking a lot about Open RAN. And so open caching is the kind of, in my opinion, the next step for organizations like Verizon to be able to deploy, cached data, files, content right to the edge of our network. I mean, if it was up to me, I'd basically put it in the cell site. So, but we're not there today, but we are very serious, and we've made a large commitment to deploying open caching on our network. And that's a space that I think is going to grow, and I think that's a space that delivers a pretty great result for end consumers who are watching content on their devices.
So without mentioning names, I mean, if I go back in my career 10 years to when we started doing CDNs in a former company at the time, I remember at the time we spent a lot of effort with perhaps the biggest consumer of bandwidth for most networks at the time, and definitely they were very anti-open anything. It was their algorithms, and they were not going to share with anybody else. Is that something you see changing in the industry?
Yeah, I do. I very much do. I mean, and especially, from my perspective, which is media and entertainment, I think it's very important to adopt, standards that support, an industry and a growing industry at that, where, during COVID, during the pandemic, so many people were watching content online. So many people were having, an experience, and we wanted to make sure that experience was great. What I think is important there is the differentiation, right? The ability to have content, the ability for content, once you start to play the content, you're not getting rebuffers, you're not getting refreshes. You've got very low jitter. That content experience is excellent. I think, and I'll leave you with more of a question, which is, right now the industry is trying to figure out, do you need high resolution? Does high resolution really, keep the customer from churning? Does it keep them watching longer? And that's a question that's actually out there right now. That's a very, relevant question that we're trying to figure out.
I see these, I mentioned earlier, I'm somehow connected in with all these cell tower spotters on Twitter. One of the things they do, they take a speed test. And the other thing they do is what Tim's talking about. Then they do the video test themselves, and sometimes it doesn't match. That's quite often actually it doesn't match. That's an interesting little nugget, I suppose. Anyone have a question in the audience? I'm going to move on a little bit. Let's go a little quick around these now. But back into the telco edge, Josh, this was for you. You've kind of talked about it already. Are CDNs the right model for telco edge cloud? Should we be using really the same physical locations and facilities for all the next gen applications we might be talking about?
Yeah, I mean, listen, CDNs play an important part in delivering content, because a lot of those CDNs are on a global basis, and so they are making it a lot easier for the content providers to be able to deliver, a seamless content experience on a global basis. But for sure in North America, and I think we've proved it, and Verizon's done a phenomenal job here, especially early on with Disney Plus, where you saw us delivering a pretty phenomenal Disney Plus experience directly on our open caching implementation.
And let's go to Tim. Tim, what difference does it make that about half of internet traffic, actually probably a little more, comes from maybe 5 companies?
I think it can be helpful if they do what's being talked about and they move to open caching. I think and again, I'm having to go back a few years in my career here, the struggles that we had in the early days of CDN and again, a lot of bandwidth coming over the top that service providers were really struggling, and I think today even still struggle with managing. And really the model then, there were certain content providers who were happy to help, but they wanted full control over the content caches. And I like very much if this trend towards open caching really takes off and everybody supports it, that we move away from that model of effectively, the content provider puts a power-sucking alien that they control in the service provider networks, and the service provider has no ability to really interact with it. It gives a better service for people using that content, but the value add of the service provider and the interaction that the service provider can have in that situation is very much, because it's a closed infrastructure, it's very limited. So I think the solution, very much, open caching, that's the way to go if everyone can sign up to that. So,
let's go to Josh, but Paul, if you want to comment. Josh, the second part of this I was interested in is how do the telco network teams actually interact with the technical teams in the media and cloud companies? You mentioned you're in Boston. Is it basically you go to Boston and have breakfast and chat about it, or because that's kind of in a way what we want to get away with automation, or is there a?
Well, so first of all, I'll go wherever the customer's at. That's
of course.
very important to say. But we've got great partners, right? I mean, look at our Wavelength product today. Wavelength is with AWS, right? And I think there's a lot of capability that we still have untapped in that space, and we're going to continue to harness it because we know that our investment in this 5G deployment, we know that our investment in the intelligent edge network, that's our One Fiber project where we're deploying about 1,500 route miles a month of new fiber, are critical for delivering that 5G experience that consumers are expecting. And then on top of that, and I know it was alluded to earlier in the day, our fixed wireless access product, where we are, basically inside the U.S. and North America deploying a last mile, broadband solution, is absolutely key for us to deliver that best a breed, experience, and that means that the, Verizon as a telco, that interaction that you see, not just with the media companies, but with the cloud hosting providers. I talk about it a lot. We are agnostic. Okay, so we have. Are you? Sorry to interrupt. Are you easy to deal with in the sense that just to keep this in the sense that one of the things that the promise of Wavelength and Azure Public Mech and the Google thing is that if you're a developer or a content person, you haven't got to actually talk to Verizon or any person. You just dial in through the console, you're done. You're spot on. You are really spot on, and we do a lot of work to develop those relationships with the software developers, right? So that the actual devs, when they're thinking about their next generation product solution, they are able to deploy that, and they don't have to come to somebody like myself to make that work. Good. Any comments, Paul, or we'll move on? I've got. Go ahead. From on to my other topics now. Here we go. Unless anyone's got a question. What I wanted to get to, we've done venues. We'll come back to that in a minute, though, Paul. What about this far edge? This Josh has mentioned it. For a few years, this was the big hype that, in fact, I can go back over a decade and talking about caching on the cell site and breakout locally and all that sort of thing. You have a lot of these, as American Tower and all the venues and everything, you have a lot of far edge assets. Do you think we'll see content and applications in the aggregation network or deep into the RAN in the next 5 years, as I've got on the chart?
I'd say it's happening as we speak. It's starting to happen as we speak.
Not talking about venues, not talking about stadiums or airports. I'm talking about in the wide area.
No, that may take a bit, but if we're talking about in building, yeah, absolutely. If you look at some of the work that we're doing with our friends at Sienna, Juniper, we're developing the next generation 5G network, and that includes turning the facility basically into the edge. I mean, where in the past we were dealing with, all right, so how do we connect this to an edge data center? No. The edge data center is the equipment room in that facility at this point.
But here we're talking about these large venues, right? The stadia, the airports, exactly. big office facilities,
yes, we're talking
like
about some of the largest facilities, some of the largest venues that you could think of to deploy. Well, it's a private/hybrid network. Racetracks, airports, very large venues. But in the far edge. Yeah, it's coming. We're working on technologies such as C-V2X, connectivity of vehicles to everything, where we need to be a lot closer to the vehicle. You can't make you can't turn a sub-millisecond decision into something that's going to take 110 milliseconds. Something negative is going to happen in that amount of time, or could happen in that amount of time. So that's happening right now. We have two ongoing pilots in which we're validating exactly those concepts. So how far do we need to be, or how close do we need to be to what's actually happening to the end device? Mm-hmm. So the onboard unit in a vehicle.
Yeah. So CV2X for everyone is cellular. Vehicle, yeah, to everything, which could include a roadside unit, which is the edge device we're talking about.
Exactly.
What about, Josh, say we're in this large venue, we're in the stadia or wherever, and we actually want to consume some content created there.
Yeah, I talk a lot about this. I talk a lot about when consumers are not just in the living room anymore. As you guys know, because you are the consumer, you are going to an event and you want to have a unique experience in the event. We've done a lot of great stuff there, whether it's the Indianapolis 500 or whether it's the Super Bowl or whether it's a regular baseball game and you're going to go to the baseball app, and you're going to find that when you go to the baseball app or you go to the Super Bowl and you open the Super Bowl app inside the venue, that you're going to have a different content experience. You're going to be able to have a unique experience inside the venue. So we talk about the inside the venue experience. I talk about what's happening outside the venue, meaning whether it's on the subway or whether it's in the parking lot with a tailgate experience, and then the living room experience that content experience is going to drive. And each one of those three spaces has a unique opportunity to deliver a differentiated experience. So for instance, when you're inside the venue, you're looking for an ultra low latency experience. You're not going to want to watch something on your phone, a different camera angle, maybe live stats. We saw some really cool stuff coming out of the World Cup, but you're not going to want that to be you're going to want that to be real time. The stuff that's happening right outside the venue, again, may mean that you're in the environment, you're in a bar nearby, and you're not in the living room where you've got this full surround experience. And so you want to tailor the content for the location. That means that you then have to have a network that supports the delivery of that content based on where the content is. So we talk about content, location-aware content, content that literally knows the location that you're trying to deliver it to.
And Paul, these venue systems then, how mature would you say the technology stack is, the solution is?
We're if you're talking about crawling, walking, running, we're walking already. I mean, I think the solution stack is already there. We had a demo with Sienna at the Aachen University Lab a couple of weeks ago, and the end result is very satisfactory. We're testing some of the technologies that you heard about today. Whether it be next generation Ethernet technologies, whether it be separating the core from the user plane. That's all being tested, and the results are good. So it is solid. We're able to have a solid experience. From a testing perspective, everything is already there. There are still a few things that may still be nitpicks here and there on the solution set on the radio side, but that's coming. That's in the works. In many cases, it has more to do with the fact that we're deploying in a different frequency set than Verizon would traditionally use. So the focus is not necessarily there on those radios, but it's very close. It's very close.
Okay, good stuff. So last chance for a question. If not, we're bang on 5 o'clock. So going to close the panel. Thank you. Please keep joining me in thanking the panel with a round of applause. Thank you, gents. We need more women on our next panel for sure. I'll duck out. With that, we're also going to close the event. So thanks to everybody for being here and participating. It's been really great to have you. Thank you very much. And Sterling, if you have a final word. If not, thank you and see you again soon.